Hi, and welcome to Metaconscious Leaders, the podcast that, amongst many other things, pays attention to awareness. I'm Greg Suart, and my guest today, I'm delighted to say, is Joel Young. Joel is a visionary leader in the field of human consciousness with over 20 years of experience working internationally. In his inspiring talks and seminars, he shares his message of non-personal awareness, calling it the NPA process. The simplicity of NPA belies its power and the profundity of its learning. And so within just a few years, NPA has spread to over 18 countries. Joel is renowned for his combination of skill, compassion, and creativity, his understanding of human dynamics, his emotional fluency, and his open, gentle yet firm approach to his work make him a powerful personal guide. So welcome, Joel, to Metaconscious Leaders. I'm delighted you can be here with us today.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited about today's conversation. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah. I think, Joel, it was 20 years ago when you first brought this to people's awareness, NPA. 20 years ago, more or less, when you first came across my radar. And NPA, which please you'll tell us a little bit more about it in a moment. But it struck me right from the very outset when I first heard it. I think I can even remember the presentation where you were giving it. And I thought to myself, this is simple, this is self-evident, and this is so applicable. And, for all of that, it's powerful. Can we start tell us a little bit about NPA and perhaps also how it came to you? Because sometimes the story of how it arrives is also informative.
Sure. So you're quite right. I think so. It first sort of came to me, if you like, back in 2007. At the time, I'd been working in, I guess, the field of personal development, spirituality, those kind of things, and had risen through the ranks within, a certain institution. I was teaching their work all over the world. I had a very full practice in Harley Street, a clinic I had there. There wasn't really, it's like, as far as my idea of myself at the time, I was on a roll in my career and loving what I did. But I think one of the things that happened, I will tell you specifically how it came about. It's a bit weird, but I'll tell you about it, is that I think at the time, certainly the methodology I was using was emotionally intense. It was in depth in terms of like a session might be up to 3 hours. And I think there were lots of very good but very complex methods of navigating through the territory of change, transformation, personal development, just living through the territory of life that we live in. And I think there was kind of a collective request, if you like, for something a bit simpler. I liken it to like when you build a tunnel, you've got to get great big earth moving machinery to get on with the beginnings of the job. But at some point you can drive through there without needing to use the great big mechanisms. And I think NPA came along as an answer to that. So for those that don't know, NPA is 6 simple lines. As you said in the bio, it belies its brilliance, really. And I certainly had to train myself out of the idea that something this simple could be this powerful, but it's got leverage in just the right places. So the way it came about is at that time when I was at the top of my game, doing deep emotional, working through history, doing all sorts of amazing stuff. I was literally journaling. It was in Abingdon, in Costa in Abingdon in 2007. And I was journaling. I used to journal a lot on my laptop. And for me, it was a bit like, I don't know if any of your listeners have read the book Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, but my experience of journaling was a bit like that. And it was interesting because as I was journaling, a prayer, as I would call it back then, came up, an intention came up, which was kind of like, okay, God, the universe, whatever you want to call that, if there's something that wants to come through me specifically, I'm ready. And I remember so clearly that point thinking that's a weird thing to sort of put out when everything is great. I wasn't unhappy with where I was at. It was like, that's a strange thing. I let it go. And then literally a week to the day later, I was back in the coffee shop in Aberdeen. I spent a lot of time there at that point. and I was journaling, and I was having some stuff going on in my relationship at the time. And as I was sort of going into the computer, it was just like the voice of God, if you might call it that, said, just say these 6 simple lines in relation to what I was experiencing, which was anger at the time. So I went through it, and this is a bit weird, but it was comparable to lots of big 3-hour history dragging through emotional processes. But what happened with those 6 lines was, it was like the shwoomph effect, right? It's like, when there's sort of snow on the car, and then it reaches a certain point where there's no friction, and a great big lump just slides off. And I remember thinking that was really, really strange. And it came with the sort of, along with that sort of answer, in the way that I was experiencing things back then, was like, well, by the way, this is the answer to that prayer you put out. This is what we're going to give you. So off you go and teach it to the world. And I was kind of horrified. I was like, I'm used to doing like these 10-page script processes. You're telling me I've got to work with this? What the heck? So what I did is, what I often do is, I like to get to know something really well before I share it, so I can speak from my own experience. So I spent about 18 months. I introduced it to sort of clients that I knew would be open to new things, with friends that, in the industry, and just tried to figure out what it was that I had. So it wasn't until 2009 I first started teaching it. And things kind of took off from there, really, Greg. And over the years, it's developed and evolved. The 6 lines are still what they are, and you can get them on the website. Just download it. They're available for people to experience. But fundamentally, it's like I came to understand that the simplicity of it, in conjunction with a certain artistry in using it, means that it has this tremendous power. So that's kind of how it came along all that time ago.
And what is it?
So
What is non-personal awareness?
So the strapline would be, it's a simple way to stop taking things personally. So how I define it today, so there's the NPA process, which is those 6 lines. They offer the perspective that fundamentally nothing is personal. And if you lean into sort of the quantum model, that will tell you, they would call it non-local. Everything exists non-locally, but it uses a simple set of words to introduce that perspective. Because when we take things personally, we kind of identify with them. They get sticky and stick to us, and they're not always helpful. I mean, we're interested in where it's creating suffering. So when you find where the attachment is and run it through that little process, it helps to sort of create a frictionless space, so it can do that shawump effect and fall away without needing to necessarily go into a whole bunch of history and all the rest of it. So you could call it an intervention. Some people call it a prayer. I wouldn't call it a prayer. It's like a set of statements that offer a perspective, but that's a very powerful perspective when it's connected with something that is ready to leave.
So it's a higher level of awareness, or almost perhaps a state of neutrality, transcending ego, I, mine. Is that?
Well, interesting you say that. So I don't use the word ego anymore. I've been steeped in the kind of the world of, non-dual world, and, doing satsangs and those kind of things. I prefer to call it the personality. And it's interesting you say, does it transcend it? In a sense, it takes you through a process that opens you to the widest perspective, but also grounds you back into the very personal, because that's where we live day to day in this world.
Wonderful.
And I've always been a humanist at heart, and I think one of the reasons for the success of NPA is that it includes the personality as part of the equation, and doesn't judge the personality. I mean, we all have stuff in our personalities where we could mature it, perhaps, but I think what I experienced in the sort of more non-dual world, even if the teachings don't directly say it all the time, a lot of the implications in that world is that you have to get rid of the ego. In my case, I'd say the personality. And I'm always like, good luck with that, because that's part of how we function, to get business done. We're here on a business leadership. If you haven't got a strong and mature personality, it's going to have a hard time. But having access to the wider perspectives can loosen up the grip when the personality gets stuck. And in those 6 lines, that's kind of what it does, which takes us on to like the other definition of NPA, or non-personal awareness, which is the full name is that it's become more of a perspective or a philosophy, really, in general, including what I'm really honing in on these days, which I call the Agendaless way when it comes to facilitating people and life in general. And also, I've always defined it as an awareness delivery system. You mentioned awareness. I think awareness is the power behind it. It's just it allows you to, a bit like a syringe is a drug delivery system, right? For the most part, it's kind of got a needle, it's got a body of the stuff, which is the non-personal perspective. And if you target it right, a bit like a cortisone injection, if you target it right, it'll kill the pain. I mean, cortisone will suppress the pain, but that's a complete bad analogy, Joel. But, you know, fundamentally, it's like it will deliver the awareness of the perspective that it's not personal, which has the potential to really release what's being taken very personally.
So nature is also non-personal. Storms are non-personal. Floods are non-personal. And so is this non-personal awareness, does it connect us with our natural world, the environment?
I would say it helps. It can help connect you with your natural way or your natural path. I wouldn't reduce it to nature or any idea or consciousness. It will meet you where you are. I mean, you're quite right. Storms. People find it often easy to think, oh well, like the weather is not personal. There are certain teachings out there along the lines of you create your own reality that are pushed towards the idea that we are somehow independent beings, you know, that have the power to, you know, to control, for example, the weather. Well, maybe so, but if that were true, I'd see people walking around in little bubbles. So while it's, you know, peeing down here in North Yorkshire, you know, there'll be a bubble of sunshine. That's just not the case. We're subject to wider energy forms, and we have to sort of work within that. And that's really true of everything. It's fundamentally there are fields of possibility, if you like, and some of those we connect with and express, and some we don't. But they're there regardless, and the awareness of that in itself can be huge in terms of how do I deal with this crazy world we live in. You know, it's like, well, fundamentally it's like you find your piece of the puzzle, and then you navigate in accordance with your natural brilliance. You let go of the bits that are blind, deaf and dumb, and then you become a more effective human being.
You mentioned there peeing it down in Yorkshire. I understood you're having a drought at the moment, like much of the rest of the country.
Well, a little bit of rain yesterday. It's been nice and warm up here, but yeah,
Oh,
generally last
well,
year was entirely a monsoon. The whole of
right.
summer was a monsoon, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a little bit coming in the next day or so. So, as has been said, NPA is there. It's self-evident. It's with us all the time. But what can you say to people or what do you say to people who want to become more aware of it, make it a conscious, make it a, a real evident practice within their life, within their business, within their working life?
Well, there's a couple of routes to that. I mean, again, as I said earlier, we give away the 6 lines with a little bit of instruction for free, so you can go to the npaacademy.com, hit quick start, and just download it. Then it'd be a matter of, for NPA specifically, you know, it's like make it a daily practice, because each time you do that process, it delivers a little bit more awareness of it, to the point where I've seen for myself and for other people that have really immersed themselves in it. I think of it as like the sort of the non-personal perspective kind of wakes up in you. And this isn't unique to NPA, in as much as like anything that you practice becomes sort of, you get unconscious competence around it, right? So in that sense, if you practice it a lot, then what you'll find is you just generally take things less personally. You generally are more available to sort of to be clear and conscious, to use your word, in how you go about life. I believe that, you know, there's, no matter how much practice of anything you do, there'll always be more. There'll be edges you find, but then you can lean more into the process. But people that have done it for many years often report, and I've had this experience, where something that maybe before that I haven't specifically looked at would have triggered me because I've taken it personally, just won't anymore. So it brings sort of a level of peace and clarity into your life. So yeah, I mean, that's the place to start always.
I'm sure I'm sure it will help a number of our listeners if you say what the 6 lines are, because otherwise they're going to be itching to find this out and get onto your website, we'll put all those details in the notes anyway. But could you just give those 6 lines, because that will encapsulate, and then they can see further from your website.
Sure. So, I mean, fundamentally, let me walk through the process a bit then, because it starts with some kind of what I call a spew, which is just a unedited, not trying to be spiritually or analytically clever expression of self. So if you're with a client, let's say you were my client, I just invite a spew. So you then just go yada, 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 and tell me what's going on. And the artistry comes is I'd be listening for what I call a cookie cutter, which is a keyword, a phrase, something that has sort of the energetic tag of that's me, that is, or it's been taken personally. Once you've got that bit, you then put that into the blank space. There's a blank space in 5 of the 6 lines. So let's say we're chatting away, and what pops out to me from what you say is not good enough, right? A classic, thing, not good enough. Then the lines would be this, not good enough. And you could read it out for yourself, but if you're with a client, you'd just get them to repeat it. This, not good enough. This energy of not good enough, this pure energy of not good enough is not personal, which is repeated 2 more times. This pure energy of not good enough is not personal. This pure energy of not good enough is not personal. And the last line is, and I am willing to experience it. And then you just notice what, if anything, happens. And it's really that simple. Crazy, right? But I've seen amazing things happen.
And what happens for me when I do that is it separates out the I from what's happening, and therefore makes it non-personal, because it's somewhere out there. This is my experience of it, and that's the power. Because once it isn't me, once it's out there, then I can work with it.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 ways that we suffer from personalization. So quite right. There's a way that like taking something personally is literally saying that's me, that is. So if you're a kid, your dad calls you an idiot, and then you take up an identity, you go, oh yes, that's me, I'm an idiot. And then you build a whole sub persona around that, and then you blind yourself off to other ideas in subtle ways and not so subtle ways. You try to prove it, disprove it, you build a whole identity around it. You've taken it personally, so you've included yourself in that vibration which isn't working for you. The other way is you exclude yourself from something. So you can use NPA to include yourself in a vibration. So, a classic one is like, they're the rich people, I'm the poor people. And by the way, my family were very proud of that kind of thing. What you've done there is that that's not me, that is. But by coming into the awareness that this is a something which exists energetically everywhere, like a radio broadcast, you can then allow yourself to drop the disidentification in the case of like abundance, say, issues, and let yourself include yourself. I can include myself in that. I am also, or I can be, in the rich people section, or whatever that is for each person. So it, by taking you into the awareness that of the non-personal field, and again, you don't have to think about it or understand it. It works with kids. It works with, people who've never done any of this stuff. It just somehow seems to get under the radar and go, okay, so it's okay. Either I'm saying it's me and it hurts, so therefore it's ready to be let go of, or it's like I'm saying it's not me and I really want it, and I'm suffering from that, so I can then let that come into me and be part of that energy. In the same way, it's like I want it to be. I'm here in Yorkshire last year in the pouring rain. I could say, "Oh yeah, we're the rainy people." And it's like, well, maybe I could include myself in the sunny thing, which may inspire a few steps, like booking a flight, going to Florida or to wherever the sunshine is, and that. So the mechanisms happen to include yourself in that vibration. In the rich and poor thing, which is a very classic thing, because I see this as a response. It inspires a bunch of changes of perception. It can inspire certain behaviors that facilitate the, in quotes, manifestation of what it is you'd like to allow to come.
And then the last line says, and I'm willing to experience this. It's kind of grounding it back. We're not running away from it. It's an experience. It's not personal, and it's there to be lived
Yeah.
and to be almost transcended and mastered.
Yeah, so that's where we come back to including the personality, right? It's like when it popped out of me just that very simple way. And then, of course, me being me, I had to reverse engineer and analyze it and figure out what the hell it was. How is this working? It makes no sense to me, and it's obviously going to make no sense to other people. So I need to understand it. And that line, I am willing to experience it. When I first looked at it, I went, oh no, this is supposed to be non-personal. There's an I in it. I must have, done something wrong. But it's so important because it is where, you do literally come back into acknowledging the personal perspective, which is really what we primarily live through. It's one of those lines that some people who are in the kind of I must fix and get rid of stuff mind, I don't want to experience it. But the reality is you already are. The willingness to experience it means that it can have movement and flow, whether it's something that you've not been experiencing you'd like to experience, or whether it's something that's pretty crappy and you want to let it pass. Still, that willingness to experience it is part of the mechanism of how things move through us. I mean, oftentimes people in that I'm not willing to experience it, they set the very fight, the conflict that creates energetic charge, which makes the attraction or attachment stronger. If there's an energy, if you like, that if we think about it in terms of the mind, when we have our mind games within ourselves, a fear or something will often, it doesn't care whether you fight it, love it, hate it, whatever. If you engage with it, then it's got some traction, right? So bringing that neutrality, which you mentioned earlier, is powerful, and the willingness to experience it includes experiencing it, leaving.
Excellent. So can we bring this into business and see where this is so highly relevant to business practice, business leadership? Where do you see in your experience are the most meaningful or the most valuable applications of this, or commonly used applications in business practice?
So most of the issues that I see with business leaders in particular, although it's true across the board, I've worked with, from secretarial pools to CEOs and those kind of things, is they're just human. It's human stuff. It's like often personality stuff. It's clarity. We had a quick chat before we started recording, like you talked about decision making, that there are many personal interactions within any human setting, including business, that can become tricky as a result of taking things personally. One of the things that I love about, and it makes sense with this podcast in particular, Greg, is it's like the idea of, oh, it's not personal, it's business, is often one of those things that is like tied to basically being an arse. It's like it's just having no human heart and compassion. And it's kind of the exact opposite. I found that most of the business context that I've worked in, there's actually a part of it is the longing for how do I keep a sense of, in many cases, like the higher vision, but also stay connected to my people. How can I present things and communicate things in a way that gets what I can see needs to be done, but also have a sense of the balance of kindness and functionality within the system that I've generated, if it's someone's own business or corporate team or those kind of things. So those tools, in one sense, are natural, or seem to be a natural consequence of the non-personal philosophy. But also a lot of the work that I do is also in the area of like conflict resolution, communication, those kind of things. And then decision making, again, it can be, the idea of responsibility can become very twisted and very pressurized within a business environment. You need to make a decision that has ramifications and consequences. There's risks always, of course. So how do you navigate that? And NPA, I've come to learn, is an amazing tool. And of course, beyond the NPA 6 lines, we have like 39 different technologies or frames, we call, which can help people to get their, I've mentioned already, clarity within themselves, ways to get like a North Star guide in relation to whatever the context of the decision that needs to be made, whether it's the entire business or a department or a subset of what's happening in a business. And that can be incredibly helpful to get that clarity and not be muddied up and lost in the weeds of all the human shenanigans that we've inherited from, thousands of years of often quite rubbish ideas about humanity and communication. So I think it's a great tool for, for anyone in business. Certainly, I think I have done some work with like say secretarial pools. I'm thinking of a specific example, but most of the work people seem to find me are more in the sort of leadership roles anyway, and they're having the struggles of life, and even as much like home life can impact business life. We're not really that. We can be compartmentalized, but there's a way that it can still leak in, even if we're pretty good at that.
You mentioned there conflict. Conflict is, there's that thing, isn't there, where anatomically what happens in the body when we become angry is most of the oxygen goes away from our brain and goes towards the muscle, and we literally become less intelligent. So anger is a real thing. It really does debilitate our ability to lead, to make wise decisions, and so forth. So actually seeing the anger coming on is an emotional intelligence that is really useful and powerful in leadership, and essential indeed. So NPA, and you mentioned their conflict. How do you bring it in? Because I think I can see how it does, but love to hear your articulation of that.
Well, okay, just to go to your point, yes, anger is one of those emotions that does some physiological stuff that does not help one's clarity or functionality. I think I've come to generalize it even more to stress in general. So when the system is stressed, i.e., not running optimally, it tends to run a lot worse. Fear. Some people will go more to fear than to anger, but the results fundamentally are the same. When it comes to conflict, it's like if you think about taking something personally, what it often does is you have an identity within inside of you that begins to defend itself. And defense, of course, in that way is a form of attack. So it creates conflict. We can have parts of ourselves that are in conflict. The part that wants, has these fears and wants to offset the fears, the part that wants this growth and wants to sort of lean into that. And they can sort of just tug at each other. But that does the same job in terms of the sort of biology and the psychology of beginning to shut things down. I mean, one of the most common responses to conflict is some form of paralysis. It's either kind of paralysis or attack, really. It's neither of which are particularly helpful. So by introducing that neutrality, I mean, there's a specific frame we use. We've got an event actually coming up. I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but coming up, our next event is the harmony equation, which lays out the specific sort of syntax for conflict resolution. But fundamentally, the non-personal philosophy will help drop the defense, but lean into the positives or the useful stuff that is available, and just help you navigate to where you have, again, that clarity, which means that you can put aside the personalized trash, if you like. I don't know how swear friendly this is. I tend to swear more. I'm being on my best behavior here. Trash, we'll say, that just gets in the way of functional conflict resolution, either internal, external. And one of the things that I'll often talk about with conflict that is often overlooked is certain personality types have a real hard time with conflict with people outside of themselves. So in the business setting, maybe, two of your team are in conflict, and that's a real difficult thing. So it can also help you sort of regulate and come into sort of peace so that you can actually deal with that, not take it personally. Like, oh, what have I done? Therefore I can't resolve it. I'm useless. It goes down an unhealthy track. Or again, paralysis, not my problem. They can deal with it, but it's obviously dysfunctional and not helping the team. So there's ways that the tools that we have can really help deal with those three kinds of conflict: really internal, self and another, or something else, and then external conflict as well.
It strikes me as that NPA is a key element in emotional intelligence as well, which is quite widely formulated in some areas. Indeed, I do quite a bit of work there myself. But the ability to access that non-personal awareness, I think, is a really key element to identifying and being able to build awareness and then mastery around the emotional experiences that we're having.
Yeah, I wouldn't limit it. I mean, you're absolutely right. Yes, it can do. But one of the the approaches that we take in NPA is to not be in any way prescriptive around the sort of modalities that people use. But what I mean by that is, like, some people are not as connected to their emotional world as others. And I've said my background is in more emotionally focused approaches, but I found that there were people that just had a real hard time doing that. So whether your experience of something is more cerebral or more emotional, it will meet you there and can use that mode, or more sort of somatic, more in the body. It's like it will meet you there. So yes, emotional intelligence, also cognitive intelligence, also physical intelligence, but they're all different forms of how we become aware of and wise to how our system is set up to run, and how we can use the word mastery, which is, our practitioner training is called mastery. You're quite right. It's like through the awareness, you become wise about and cognitive of and conscious of your own operating system, if you like. And that's powerful indeed. You learn how to notice the patterns that have been used to cope with bad strategies and how that feeds into it. You notice the way that your system operates, that you can bring in different perspectives that are really balancing, neutralizing, grounding, if that's what is working for someone. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be emotional. It can be very cerebral or very, very body based as well. I think generally we will have access to all three, but I do think there's a way that each of us have a bias or a tendency in one or more of those areas. And I think a lot of the approaches that I've experienced over the many years that I've been doing this sort of make one or the other somehow better or more relevant. And that can be alienating for people that don't fit that model. And I love about NPA is that it goes, I don't care. Just be you, and everything that you need, all the keys to your kingdom are in your current expression. You don't need to be anything else in order to navigate your way to something that is, by all measures better according to you. And that's a key part of, as I mentioned earlier, the agendaless way is not getting trapped into certain dogmas about this is better than that or that's better than that. It's like, who is this human being that's in front of me? Where are they living? Because where they're living is where they're creating and experiencing everything. And yeah, they might move to different territory that they haven't been to before, but right now it's all here.
If you can take triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same, success and failure are big items in business, and as much of it's self-imposed as imposed externally. So, we have our own critics, internal critics, as well as the external ones. And sometimes the internal ones are more severe than the external ones. How does NPA frame success and failure?
Well, if people are heavily identified with success and failure, then it's a polarity, and we have something called the polarity frame that's really good with that. But on a more sort of, in a more general sense, success and failure, I think one of the things that people think when they talk about neutrality or non-personal, sometimes we'll get this idea of this sort of passive, everything's the same, everything's like fine. And that isn't my experience. The difference is, it's like if you're identified with or attached to what it means about you, if this, what is defined as success or failure, happens, then that's likely a recipe for suffering. Whereas, like, you can stand in your passion for the success and your learning, say, from a failure very strongly and be very emotionally involved, really, really in it, fully active, without that piece of attachment that somehow it means something about you. That's where you get to enjoy the personality aspect, right? Like, this is a Levi's shirt, and back in the day, I wouldn't be seen dead wearing anything with a label on it because that was just not right. Turns out my personality likes nice shirts, but it doesn't say anything about me, even though people say, oh, it's got a label. It says something. That's not where it's coming from. It's just a better made shirt, right? So I like it. That's me enjoying my personality. Whereas back in the day where I was more in the non-dual world, it was like, it was the virtue signaling would not have fit. of like wearing something that would be egotistical, to revel in certain aspects of the personality. Whereas, part of, I guess, my personal philosophy is like, we're on this little ball of rock with a very thin atmosphere for a very short time. And, it turns out we're made with a mechanism that can have a lot of fun. Called the personality, right? We can interact in a way that can be awesome. And I say fun, that's one side of it, but also the ups and downs and learnings of life. There's a juiciness to the personality that I think with NPA you find you can, for many people who come from the other spectrum, the more enlightenment thing, find that they get such relief from going, what, I can just be my beautiful self, just in all my personality quirks and everything else, but also mature and be functional. I can celebrate my wins and I can cry about my losses, but you can do that and not be like broiled up in a way which causes you unnecessary suffering, or that the idea of that creates that paralysis or that reactivity or the delays or all the things that can happen when risk and decisions come into play.
Yeah. So perspective, and perspective, it gives that and then just enables you to play.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, I love that. It's a great way to say it. It's like, but even play is like, but my little brain goes, so that can be taken as not being serious, but you can play I'm just arguing like with the potential objections we might get from people going, well, that's not very serious. It can be really beautifully serious and beautifully light all at the same time. And that's the gift.
Take acting. Take Shakespeare's quote of, we are but actors on a stage. I mean, acting on a stage can be serious, it can be fun. And also, the more you embody yourself in it, the more you engage in it, the more real it is. But you can still be aware that you're an actor and you're playing the part, so that you know that this is not everything, although that it is real at this moment in time because you're on a stage and you're playing a role.
Absolutely. I like when it comes to identification, which is kind of can be perceived as like a dirty word in the more enlightenment world. I'm always like, well, hold your identifications lightly. So again, the actor thing, I've used that as it's a really good illustration of the possibility. It's like, um, if an actor fully embodies that role in that moment, it's like they are having thoughts, feelings, and actions that mirror what they're embodying fully. But as you say, there's that underlying awareness that's not me, that's not who I am really. And that's where you get to play in. Again, we keep it in the business world. It's like, right now there's a role I'm playing of making this big decision which is going to affect a lot of people, and you can begin to ask yourself questions that are powerful, like, what are the aspects? I like do it like a backstory. If I was being a character here that is in alignment with myself, it's not like trying to be somebody else. If I can identify what are the things that really matter that will be supportive in this decision making, then I can lean into that the way an actor would, and that will help clarify and channel the thoughts, behaviors, and feelings that are associated with the most healthy version of the self, or defined by the client, the most useful, helpful, effective, whatever those values are, sort of persona, if you like, that will help guide and delete the thoughts that are unhelpful, if you like, or the ideas that are unhelpful, and invite the thoughts that are going to be most pertinent to whatever the task is ahead.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Aware of the time, are there any other aspects of NPA and business leadership that you would like to highlight at this moment that we haven't yet covered?
Well, I think we've just touched on the agendaless way. So most of my focus these days is on sharing the agendaless way and NPA mastery with coaches, facilitators, people that work one-on-one with people. So we have our NPA mastery, which is our certified practitioner training. In one sense, it gives you a whole bunch of really cool non-personal tools, but fundamentally it I guess my big vision is to make a dent in our industry that up levels facilitation one-on-one with people where there's no agenda, because those agendas really are symptoms of dogma and identity that add friction into the navigation space with a client. So it's baked into the non-personal philosophy. And I think it's the same thing when you think about interactions within a business setting. Often it really is a facilitation role. If you're the boss of the company, if you're a team leader, essentially your role is to facilitate functionality and outcomes with a bunch of humans. And what can create friction in that is the same as with people that are working one-on-one with clients in the world of healing and transformation. The same artifacts can get put in as a result of those personalized facets. So I think whether mastery, I talk about mastery is definitely designed for more people in the coaching industry, that kind of thing. But I wanted to sort of mention it here as much to sort of pop that little seed of the possibility of engaging in whatever way, whether it's with me personally or through the offerings that we have with NPA and the NPA Academy. It's like baked in are the keys to frictionless facilitation. And while business folk may not necessarily have thought about it in that way, that's fundamentally what human interaction is. If there is, you can have, in the same way we talked about, you can have, you can be passionate about something like an actor. When I talk about the agendaless way, the common misconception is, oh, what? So we don't have any goals for our business. Well, that's rubbish. Well, no, it's exactly not that. You can identify what are the goals that are truly aligned and then adhere to them, but be available with flexibility to any changes along the way if you drop the agenda, or not have an underlying approach to those human interactions that have an agenda that just end up with people around you doing the donkey thing and putting their hooves in, which is exactly what happens in humans when they're being pushed around. You can facilitate beautifully changes, hitting targets, all of those things when you begin to drop the agenda. So it's on my radar to write the book next year. So generally about NPA, but primarily about the agendaless way. So
I love the thing about the agendaless way as you just described it there, because what came to my mind was that we have an agenda, a published agenda. That's the one that's up on the clipboard and up on the screen and so forth. But I then have my own hidden agenda, which my own personal agenda, and that is causing friction, not only externally but also internally. And very often I will be unaware of my own agenda, which is kind of running as some silent program beneath my level of awareness. So I love this bit where when we experience friction, it's like, what's causing the friction? Where's this friction coming from? What really is at the root of this? And once again, I think NPA gives us the opportunity to, first of all, create a little bit of distance. And having got that objectivity, we're then able to look at it, understand it, and work with it in a much more practical, tangible way.
absolutely. And again, I've got a specific testimonial from someone who came into one of the early mastery, and her testimony said, I thought I was pretty agendaless. And then I realized how many agendas are running under the surface. And like anything, it's an ongoing practice, a discernment, but becoming, aware of the, like you call it, hidden agendas can take that grit out of the cogs, which, grit in cogs is never a good plan, and make the system of ourselves, or in the case of a business system, a team, even the tech, the whole thing, the system will run smoother without friction, stress, all the things we've talked about today. They just stress the system and make it less optimally functional. And so I've seen people that have gone through mastery and been really immersed in the agendaless way, not just their practices grow and expand, they get clear on who they are and their output to the world, and their lives become more functional in a way that matters to them. And I think that's the gift of really becoming mindful of, present to, aware of what are the agendas, how can we sort of call ourselves out on them and drop them where they're not serving us. And again, back to business, I think that's has all sorts of potential in the business world to make businesses, business entities, business personnel to have happier, more functional business life.
Thank you, Joel. A great note to close out on. Before we do, though, how can people find out more about you, about the work you do, what you offer? Where can they get that information?
Sure. The best place for you to go is to www.thenpaacademy.com. Say top of that page, you'll see quick start if you want to download the NPA sheet. And then, you can do further training. We have a basic training that you'll get offered at a special price if you download the sheet. I would recommend you do, just to get, because a lot of people take on the sheet and then they'll bring their dogma and agenda to it, and it's still pretty robust, but you can't beat some training. And then, if anyone, listener, if you're feeling like maybe Joel can help me personally with some corporate coaching or something, then reach out. You'll find details to contact me on that site. You can also go to joelyoung.com, which has got a bit of a corporate write-up. It explains why I've got guitars behind me and all that kind of thing. And reach out. You can book a call from that page or my general one-to-one page, which you'll find on that website. And let's have a chat, see if it's a fit to work with you.
Excellent. Well, as a little bonus, and this was on my mind in any case before you said what you said, would you say just a couple of minutes about your guitars in the background?
Sure. So
You were a rock god, or a nearly rock god.
I would say I was a wannabe rock god.
A wannabe rock god.
Ever since I was a kid, I picked up the guitar at 8 years old. When I was 11, we moved house and no one at school played any instruments. So I taught my friends to play guitar, drums, bass, put a band together. And then we had minor success in the alternative rock scene in the sort of end of the 80s, early 90s. Did pretty good in Sweden. Almost got signed to, we were like literally about to sign on dotted line with Sony. We had a European tour, all sorted. And then those of you who know the alternative rock scene about that time, Suede came along, the band Suede. And it was one of those moments where the industry pivoted to what they considered to be the upcoming idea, and they dropped us like a stone. So I had some wild and ragged times, touring, all that stuff, all that you might expect from life as a rock star. And it was always my dream as a kid. But part of the fallout of that was to start going on an inward journey. I started to encounter sort of self-help and things like that. I was pretty out of control with a number of substances at the time as well. So to come through that, and I found that I can still be a rock star of sorts when I'm in, speaking to crowds and stuff. And music is still very much part of my life. But it turns out destiny had a different plan for me, and I'm very thankful for that, because I get to be part of affecting people's lives. Music can affect people's lives, but you don't always get to see it. I get to see it day in, day out, which is a beautiful thing. But yeah, that's why I've got vintage guitars up behind me, and there's many more around.
Well, we also are very grateful that the universe has directed you in the way that it has. So thank you very much, Joel, for being our guest today. It's been truly great. Be well. Take care.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate being here.
Oh, I so enjoyed that. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed watching this podcast, please subscribe, share it with friends and colleagues, and also leave a comment. It's really useful for us to know what you're thinking as well. Until next week, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Be well.